Well, hello everybody, and welcome again to the Weirdly Magical podcast with Jen and Lou. And this episode we'll be talking about the Taurus New Moon, but more on that in a minute. Jen, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Jen Duchen, and I am an Akashic healer, reader, teacher, numerologist, and creator of the Illuminating Journey Cards. And I guide my clients to find or activate their soul's choice.
And I am Louise Eddington, astrologer, author of 2 books, Modern Astrology and The Complete Guide to Astrology. And I guide women to find the tools to lift themselves out of confusion and stagnation so that they create a life that is wildly free, untethered, and both extra and non-ordinary. And a little bit of housekeeping before we dive in to the chart and everything around it and pull cards. We take questions, weirdlymagicalpodcast@gmail.com, if you would like your question to be featured on the show. Also, we have a Patreon, patreon.com/weirdlymagical. We are now heading into the realms of support where we'll be able to start producing Patreon only content, but we just need a few more for $3 a month to support the running of the podcast and our time. So before we look at the chart, I normally kind of go through it, but I think we're just going to pull the cards first. So Jen, do you want to show your card?
Sure. So from the Illuminating Journey card pack, this is the card that came up, the 1, Soul Portal 1. And I find it's really interesting that this is the card that's come up. So, of course, the number 1 is about new beginnings, about focusing your intention, where you want to go. And this card is, you can see, or those who can't see, there's like a woman on horseback with a shield. And she's going on this path towards, like, there's some kinds of buildings, hills, there's kind of fire, and there's also a big pink kind of cloud with a chalice and a shield or spinning shield, or could be a portal, and there's a cloud in front of her that has a sword coming out. And I think that's a really powerful message for this time. It's kind of funny that my eye is catching this, which looks in this today, it kind of looks like a creature or a pot or something with legs. So it's like, oh, that's interesting.
There's also a pink full moon at the top of the...
Oh, right.
And
That's right.
we're recording this on the Libra full moon, which is known as the pink full moon.
That's so wild. So yes, it's like that idea of focusing your intention or your sword towards the thing that you're desiring, where you want to go, as opposed to where you think you're supposed to go or should go. But this is about this true energy of activating what you're here to activate. And
It reminds me of seeking the Holy Grail too, with the chart
yes,
there. And you know, of course, the new moon that we'll be looking at is Taurus, which is very much about you know, abundance of all kinds, not just money. Well, you know, physical comforts, everything. And is that the Holy Grail we're being invited to fight for, or to move
yes.
towards, I should say.
Right, stand up for and kind of activate. I think that's a great point. Also very earthy. You have all these aspects of earth, fire, clouds, kind of this mountain, this kind of building or sacred energy, the earth. There's a lot of different elements that are speaking of the four-legged, the horse, right? It's very much about this idea of using your physical environment to create the maybe the dream or the thing that you want to bring alive.
And I find it interesting that the woman in the card is holding a shield. because Pallas Athena, I'll be talking about her a bit when we look at the astrology. She's called the Shield Maiden for many, and she's a real justice warrior. To be quite honest, she was Pallas Athena. You would go into battle, but only for a real just cause, and so she's kind of the female knights of the Holy Grail. So there we have her on that horse. Yeah,
Right. Maybe this is her card.
yeah. For sure. Cool. And the card I pulled is the one that everybody goes, oh, and I love. But anyway, it's death. The Scorpio card. Oh, and suddenly I'm echoing. Oh, it's gone. And if there's any wobbly sound, people, we apologize. But apparently, because everybody's online at the moment, there's a lot of bandwidth issues and things because of people staying at home. But I actually love this death card in this pack. We're on a Taurus new moon, and Scorpio is the opposite point of the opposite sign of Taurus. And this card really represents the principle of letting go and moving forward with detachment. We're really seeing the destruction of old forms and things right now. And the thing I love about these tarot cards, for those of you who can't see it, it's always to look in the background, because that's really what's coming. And we have this beautiful dove of peace or phoenix coming out of death's head at the top of the card. That's what it looks like to me anyway. What do you think, Jen? It looks like something's being woven
Right.
out of the
Right.
figure of death,
Right.
the skeleton. Out of
Right.
the
It's
top of it.
also like this, almost like a crown or something. The head looks like a
Yeah,
crown. And this idea of this, what it makes me think about is kind of the value or the thing that's the really true for you, right? Which
yeah,
is your truth, like the crown of who you are, the crown of your intention. That's what's kind of focusing this energy. So, kind of coming to life or using what's left, right? Whatever needs to be transformed, with this idea of being very connected to your crown.
and there's
So
a series of swirly symbols kind of going up
right,
as if
right. So it feels
the death
almost like
rebirth.
right. It's
Yeah,
almost like bubbles or whatever when you're creating. And what I find actually interesting is that, to me, it reflects exactly what uh, we were talking about in the card I got,
yeah.
right?
Mhm.
This idea of being very focused on what is true, using your physical being to create the idea that you're, what's coming down from source, your imagination, what's possible. It's like creating what is possible, because there's nothing left. Like you don't have all this encumbrance, you don't have all this extra stuff. And so it's all just like, what could you do, knowing, you know, that you're supported in doing what is true for you, and then having all these colors and potential and possibility. So
Yeah.
it really is kind of, I'm just going to put my cord up so there's some
As
matching things.
always, as
Right,
always, they align in.
right, right. Even the figure, it's like kind of very interesting. The colors, like you could say this figure on the horse could even, in some ways signify the idea of what happens in death is what's the seed of death that brings or transforms life, like brings you back to life.
And I want to read the quote that's in the fantastic book by Angeles Arian that accompanies these. This is the Toth Tarot that I use, and she does a quote, and I don't always read them, but I really like this one because it fits. Birth and death are not two different states, but they are different aspects of the same state, and that's Gandhi. I think that's some wonderful words to live by in this time where we're having really a death of the old structures and way of life and moving into this way
Definitely.
of life. So, yeah.
Right. And the idea here is not to be afraid of death,
Mhm.
right? The idea is to not dismiss death. Uh, One of the things that's so interesting about our kind of Western culture is this idea that we dismiss the things we're afraid of, we
Mhm.
hide from them, we pretend they don't exist,
Yeah.
we disassociate from the dark, from the earth, from the
From
potency.
sickness, from all that kind of thing. We try and shut
Right,
it all away. Right. Yeah.
right. We try to pretend it's not me, it's not my problem. I know what you're talking about. And so it stops us from really dealing with the deeper energies, and we are moving into that time. I mean, not just with Venus retrograde, which is a big part of that journey that is happening in May, but so this is like the foreshadowing or the preparation of this energy.
And that's because it's a Venus ruled new moon. Venus is very well, she doesn't go retrograde every year, and the last time she went retrograde in Gemini was 8 years ago. So there's various things this year that don't happen every year, and they're kind of, a lot of them are coming together in one year. So we're going through a very intense time. So the new moon itself is on April the 22nd in the US and April the 23rd in the UK and the rest of the world. The time of the new moon is at 3:26 a.m. British Standard Time or Universal Time. And it's at 3 degrees and 24 minutes of Taurus, conjunct to Uranus, which will be at 6 degrees on the new moon. And also it's in square to Saturn in Aquarius, and also aspecting the lunar nodes, which will be changing signs. There's a few things that will change signs in this lunar cycle that begins with this new moon. Venus is well into her shadow of her retrograde and will turn retrograde on May the 13th. So we've kind of got a lot to talk about, but I didn't mention everything. It's impossible. So it's a big new moon, really, with a lot happening in that cycle, not just on the day of the actual new moon chart. So we'll be talking about a lot of that. But Jen, do you want to kick off with some thoughts?
Yes, yes. And what's so interesting is because this is April, and April is the month traditionally in the old days that the wheel of the year would begin. So it's the new beginnings, it's the time to seed new things. So, of course, uh, we've had the full moon, and that's the ending, like the ending of the past, right? The one that's today, that's the end of whatever cycle we've been in. And now we're actually entering the next level of the Aquarian age. And I think this is the part where we're actually having to separate from what has been. And that's the culmination. It's like, okay, whatever was, was. And now here we are. This new moon is the new moon, right? And it's very appropriate that, of course, it's like this every year, but we're having a different year this year. So it's not the same, but that it's a Venus ruled moon, because Venus is about the earth. It's about that kind of energy. So what's fascinating, let's just look at the numbers. So first of all, the universal time, it's on April 23rd. So the 23rd is this royal line of numbers, very powerful. It gives us the courage to follow our convictions and follows the cards that Lou and I got. So 23, the royal lion. And with that, we have a 13 universal day, which I find fascinating because 13 is the number of the divine feminine. It's the number of,
The death.
right, it's the number of death, actually, in the sense of transformation. It's what we call the phoenix number. It's the cycles of life. So 4 relates, 13 is a 4 number, 1 and 3 is 4. We're in a 4-year. This is in 8 months. Well, a 4 months on the calendar, 8 in, so we have all these numbers that are activated and transforming us, helping us understand the 4 is about the earth, it's about death, it's about the seasons, it's about transformation, the 4 aspects of transformational life. So it awakens that in us. And then we also have, and then if you're in Pacific or wherever you are in the other part of the world where it's on the 22nd, that is also a 4. So it's kind of crazy. We have this 4 and energy everywhere, right? Birthing and letting go of the old, like burying the dead. This is a time of burying the dead and going, we have to use that compost in order to create something new, to plant new seeds. And then with the 3 moon, now 3 is very much what I call the number of self-love. So it's all about expressing the self, daring to kind of awaken the child in us to experiment with life and not just sit on the sidelines thinking about stuff, but actually activating things, activating joy, experimenting with what is this, what's happening. So bringing in this kind of surge. If you think about feeding plants with compost, like all the compost from the dead or the transformation, it's allowing us to kind of really put nutrition into the new, into this idea of exploring what is self-love, how do I express myself out in the world. And it's also fascinating because it's a 3 and then a 24, and 2 and 4, look, those are the two numbers, right? The 2020, which makes a 4, and then it also adds up to a 6.
Mm,
And 3 and 6 are both emotional numbers tied to love, how we love and kind of express who we are in the world.
mm.
So this is really a time of being reminded we are being supported by choosing love, choosing to articulate who we are in the world by starting new things, innovating new things, trying new things, and being liberated and experimental and imaginative and creative, because this is what we have to do, right? We actually have to plant new seeds, maybe seeds we've never planted before. And so what does that look like?
And you know, just to follow on these, some of the words that Jen has used, you know, I mentioned that the new moon is at 3 degrees Taurus conjunct Uranus. That's very innovative kind of energy. Uranus is all about invention and innovation. And in Taurus, it's all about really getting in touch with the material world, getting your hands dirty, if you like. I don't know how many people are starting gardens now under this current lockdown we're in. I think as we enter April and, you know, spring in the colder climes, it's going to increase. People are going to really start looking into growing food, getting back to more just being more in touch with the cycles of the earth, and crafting. Like, people are making masks all over the place. There's going to be a big increase in that kind of creativity and innovation with this new moon and in this lunar cycle. I think it is also aspecting by square Saturn in Aquarius. Saturn being the traditional ruler of Aquarius, Saturn in Aquarius has pretty much aligned with our increased social or physical distancing, because Saturn is boundaries and blocks, and Aquarius is the greater humanity and greater social life, if you like. So we're being, but Saturn also has another aspect. Saturn is about mastery, and it's about mastering this new way of being. I think a lot in this new moon, with these innovative new ways of doing things, new ways of living. So we're not just reliant on, you know what our culture's like. Well, you know, I'm speaking to the Western culture, of course. Not, I can't speak to everybody in the world, but you know, going out for dinner 2 or 3 times a week, we can't do that anymore. We can't, you know, all these things we were used to. You know, filling our time with entertainment that's outside. We can't do that right now currently, and I think we're going to get used to not doing that all the time with this lunation cycle and how things are beginning to shift and change.
Mm.
I also mentioned it's, sorry, I'll just finish this if that's all right. I also mentioned it's in aspect to the lunar nodes, and the lunar nodes are at 0 degrees of Capricorn and Cancer, spending their last, how many days? 12 days in those signs as they shift back into Gemini and Sagittarius on May the 5th. And of course, the 0 degree mark is a very crucial thing. It's like we're here learning these last lessons of what these lunar nodes have meant in Capricorn, the releasing end, releasing the attachment to outer rules and structures and things, and moving towards coming into the family, coming into the home, looking after our loved ones, and remembering as well that we're all in it together as one big human family. So there's a lot of lessons around that as well. So yeah, go on, Jim.
Yes, right. I was just agreeing with you when you were saying it. So yes, it's very much in alignment. I find like what's first of all is the 13, having that 13 so prominent in the sense of what's happening. That's very much the energy of Uranus. It's very much the energy of Aquarius. It's a renaissance. This idea of whether we're birthing new gardens, looking of new ways to be more connected to ourselves, to our lives, kind of recreating hobbies
Mm,
that maybe are more more earthbound and more grounded, like gardening, cooking, doing puzzles, sewing. These are very earthbound activities. This is us being involved in our lives as opposed to the way we were before,
mm,
which is just kind of skimming the surface. Oh, we're going to respond to other people's entertainment, to a movie, to a something, going somewhere, a restaurant. There's no really, it's not, there's no requirement for us to really do anything or be involved. And like here, it's like, oh yeah, now if we want to have a movie, we're making our own little movies, or people are singing these, different songs. They're doing all kinds of things to go, oh, what does it look like to be in a space when I don't have canned entertainment, when I don't have um, kind of this uh, illusion of I'm being entertained, because I find it's kind of like very, or it has been for me, just growing up in a country that people tended to be more social and go out more in terms of relating to one another, as opposed to um, just sitting in front of something. Like I'm always fascinated, or I have been. Now we're not doing it anymore. People, you go to restaurants and couples, they don't even talk to each other. They're just kind of like eating on their phone and stuff. So it's like, yeah, this is so crazy, right? So it is amazing that moving into this age of Aquarius, where we believe that it is all about the communication, right? It's a higher form of communication. And so it is about technology, but it's also about being mindful of how we use technology. Like right now, like me, myself, and I know plenty of other people are actually reconnecting with friends they haven't talked to in ages, saying, let's connect and let's have a conversation. And probably these are some people you haven't talked to in ages. And it's just like, wow, this is actually fun. We can do all this, right?
yeah,
We can connect on those levels. So I think looking at the 13, looking at the 4, looking at the 6, these are all about establishing a system, a home, a way of being that's very much connected to love, like loving our community, loving what we do, understanding free will. I'm a great proponent of free will, and I think this is a huge. Saturn in Aquarius is about establishing the ground rules of free will. So it's understanding like, here's all this stuff, here's all these resources. And Taurus is very much about resources, right? It's about what do we have and how can we use that to do things that we believe in, like our values. What do we value? What are we willing to create? And so we're forced back into this new beginning of, we're working with the land, we're working with what we have to bring out new parts of ourselves that have been dormant. And this idea of Saturn going, okay, here is the container of how you're going to work. And this idea of getting used to the idea that everyone has opinions, everyone's going to do whatever they want. We can have lockdown, somebody can decide to break the lockdown and go out and do it. And instead of us needing to police, which is the really extreme part of Saturn, is us learning that everyone makes choices, and then they and all of us deal with the consequences of what happens. So when you choose to do something outside, sometimes it's a good thing, right? But sometimes it has a negative effect. So say you could die, you can impact your family members. Um, we don't know, right? And those are choices you make. So how are you then going to be able to fit into a tribe as we move more into a tribal thinking? How will you as a total individual who says, I don't care about anyone else, I'm going to do what I want,
mhm.
will you be accepted into a tribe? Because tribe cannot function without some kind of structure.
And
And so
have
rethinking
a
the
sort of
structure.
social response.
Sorry?
I kind of think of the Saturn in Aquarius as learning social responsibility.
Right,
You know,
right,
learning
exactly.
what I do affects somebody else. It's not,
Right. And this is, but that's the overall, to me, this is the big picture of this virus is
yeah.
going, oh, I am connected. Everything I do connects or impacts someone else. So I can choose, do I want to do it so I'm impacting people in a good way, right? If I go and work on my garden, I create a work with the land or do things just like when I'm doing like the work that I do, when I'm in the Akashic field or I'm teaching, etc. I'm raising the vibration of the planet, right? Whenever we're doing things, we're either raising the vibration of the planet or we're lowering the vibration. So if we're choosing to do things because we don't care about anyone else, we're actually lowering the vibration because it's just about us. When we're choosing to do things like plant and make masks and do all these things or hang with our families, we creating joy, which is connected to that three. Like we're activating, and with the joy, we're raising the vibration, we're expanding our ability to receive information, and we're receiving it in a responsible way, right? As opposed to irresponsible, as some people on the other spectrum will be like, okay, here's information. How can I use this to control others and destroy and all that? And then we have, so it's wherever you land on the spectrum, right?
Mhm.
And there will be some consequences, but it's
Oh, there
if we buy, right, if we buy into the fear and all of those things, or like we want things to go back the way they were, then we kind of open ourselves up for more control as opposed to less, because we want to learn what is true for us. That's what's so fascinating to me about this moon, right? We are learning or planting what is true for us in the earth,
yeah. I mean,
becoming.
for sure, yeah, all that you said. I've said a few times in a few of my daily posts that I have a really strong feeling that if we do not learn the lessons of this virus, there's going to be this big gaping hole where authoritarianism is going to swoop in, and we are going to end up in in The Handmaid's Tale or something if we're not careful. Because I think it's a big lesson to humanity for sure. And I don't mean to scare anybody, because I think we do have the choice, and we are quite capable of learning these lessons, even at the smaller levels. I'm calling my mum in England more regularly, and because I know she's going to be home all the time. We even laugh about it now because my mum has she's 83 and she's always out, but not anymore. And so we're like actually having really long conversations now because she's not so busy and I'm not so busy, and we're reconnecting with people. It's kind of very joyous in some ways, as Jen said, with the three, that feeling of joy. And the innovative Uranus part of it is finding new ways to connect, because we can't go out. My buddies that I have breakfast with every now and again, we're having a virtual breakfast on Friday because we can't meet in person. So we don't have to feel this. I see so many, and I do feel for them, I guess, extroverts. I made a joke the other day about all of us introverts kind of going, all this time, now you're finding out what it's like to live in the opposite kind of world. The extroverts
Right,
have to
right.
stay home, whereas the introverts have always felt forced to socialize. Um, I don't know where I was going with
Yeah.
that one. I find that one really funny myself.
Is there rebalancing? I think this is the thing, is we're
Yeah.
rebalancing this idea of what's important
Yes.
and how we can be who we are. So this is an opportunity to be more who we are, to express our voices. Um, it just comes to mind that whole story about the naval ship, the
Oh,
naval ship, where the captain made the decision to land to help his people, which is very Uranus based, right? It's very much that Aquarian energy of that. And you can see Saturn at work. This is necessary. I need to do this so that they can. And then the top brass, whatever, fired him because they didn't like that he had a heart.
yeah.
Um, and then apparently the person who's in charge, I don't remember his title, um, flew. So I was listening to a thing, something they were talking about how a woman who used to be like some major naval officer or something was talking about it, and how this guy flew to Guam. So this is like a major expense, a major time, just a whole like putting attention into something that was unnecessary to prove a point, an autocratic point,
Yeah.
right? Like, I'm in charge, you do what I say, punish everyone. And he went there and he was saying that their original captain was, whatever his name was, I don't know if he was a captain, whatever his title is, I should say, um, was stupid and all those things. And there was a guy in there, one of the guys who who yelled out, what did he yell out? Something like,
Well, that must have been.
fuck that. Something like fuck that.
Well, that's very Uranus. Woo.
Right. Oh, it's like, he's just one of the guys in the thing. Like, what are you talking about? And that him speaking out, right, makes the guy had to apologize about what he said. But it's like, we love this guy who took care of us. And now you're coming and telling us, like, we're looking at you to help us move through this, right? You're
and
not
you're
supporting us.
and you're calling him silly for not following the rules.
Right, but you're not supporting us. Like, that means you don't care about us. All you care about is that we can be robots. But now people are not robots anymore, because we've had all of this opportunity to go, oh, I can do this, right? I can move away from the rigidity of what I'm supposed to do or who you think I am. It's like, yeah, all the rules are out the window. So it's like, okay,
Mhm. And
you're not in charge. So this is what we have to be aware of. The people who are acting like they're the leaders, that's a temporary position. It's like, we have to recognize we have to be leaders in our lives. We need to speak up. We need to act on the things we believe in, as opposed to trying to police others, right? So that's a perfect example. This guy trying to police everyone else when
mhm.
he should be taking care of what's important, right?
And to a degree, trying to police, our leaders. And I understand, that our leader here in the US and Boris Johnson in the UK, and I hope he does recover, even though I don't support it. You know, we might not agree with everything they've done, but we have to. I think we've talked about it before. We have to remember that they are playing their part in the revealing of all that's not working in our systems and our institutions. They are just kind of pieces of the jigsaw of this big revealing that we're going through, and the big transformation that we're going through. So it's possible to, not get into. I think we're only hurting ourselves when we're constantly enraged at every moment that we do it. That doesn't mean you agree with them, and it doesn't mean you sit back and let it. It's best to move the focus back into, what can I do? How can I bring this change? How can I create change I want to see? Like Jen's card, how can I reach for the holy grail that we really want, that we really desire? Instead of just fighting against all the time, all this resistance is actually making it worse, personally, I think.
Right. I think this idea that we are, I think what's really important here is to understand that the energy we use to get angry or enraged because people aren't following the rules is, it's all about our own stuff. And we're never going to expand into or have the energy to find the Holy Grail, right? If we're so focused on making other people behave. Just realizing, I think it's really important that everyone's here to do something. So what are you here to do? Um, and I do want to just address this idea of fear, like this idea of people choose to be in fear. Like, this is a choice. Like, I know people say, what are you talking about? It's not a choice. But it is. It's a choice, because fear is, to me, I think fear is a great teacher. It's a way shower. So we can go, I am afraid. There's nothing wrong with being afraid, right? The issue comes is if we're in fear of being, open about our fear, right? If we can just say, I'm in fear and I need direction, I need help, there's something missing. Why am I in fear? Like, I think a lot of reason we're in fear right now is because we've never done this before,
Yeah.
right? we don't know what it looks like. And it's like, yeah, okay, I can understand why I'm in fear about that. Um, but does that mean that I'm just not going to do anything because I'm in fear? Or does that mean I'm still going to do something and in spite of my fear, right? So what are we doing? I think this is the bigger picture. Fear is fine, but what are you doing with that fear? Are you using it to attack others? Are you using it to play small? Are you using it to blame and shame? Or are you going, okay, there's something I need to know. I don't know how to plant a garden. I don't know how to, whatever it is. I don't know how to cook. I don't know how to earn money. What is it that you need to do in order to step to the next role? And just using that creativity
Mm.
this month is key to kind of planting some seed that's going to take us forward.
It is, absolutely. And there's a couple of other things I want to mention about the actual chart. We mentioned Uranus is at 6 degrees conjunct the new moon. Well, it's in a semi-sextile to Chiron. Those two are still in Aries. Those two are still moving together. And that's very innovative ways to heal and finding new ways and finding healing our own identity within it. So that's an ongoing thing, but it's almost exact on this new moon again. And we also have another semi-sextile, and a semi-sextile is generally, well, there's mixed feelings about it. It means that the two planets are in the signs next to each other. A lot of people say that that means the planets can't really see each other because they're standing next to each other. But there's another school of thought that they're standing side by side, working on something together. So I think there's always two ways to look at it. And I love that Pallas Athena is at 29 degrees of Capricorn and Ceres is at 29 degrees of Aquarius. And they're both going to have changed sign by the full moon of this lunation. Pallas Athena is the visionary owl. She is this the shield maiden that I talked about. Ceres is the great mother, who she's represents grief, forgiveness, but also the cycles of the natural world. Summer, winter, harvest, all that kind of thing. And she's in Aquarius, the sign of innovation. And I feel that the both of them, right at the very end degrees of these two signs, are saying, right, I'm ready to bring quite visionary change in. And incidentally, Ceres is also in the shadow of her retrograde at this point too. So we're going to revisit all this with Ceres. And I think she and Pallas Athena, well, all these new bodies that traditional astrologers never talked about, I think they're crucial to where we're going in this new paradigm. They're discovered and come into our consciousness for a reason. Ceres was upgraded to dwarf planet status when Eris was discovered um, in 2005. So she's become very prominent, and she is about nurturing and how we nurture and how we like to be nurtured as well. So it's all that earthy stuff that she's involved with as well. So I love that they are what's called the anaretic degrees, because that's like the whole um, power of those signs is in there. And Pallas Athena is starting to give us a visionary way to create new rules to live by. Ceres is helping us to really innovate. So I just love that there's two are there.
Right. And it's fascinating on a bunch of levels. One, because the 29 is right on the cusp between two signs. So moving between two worlds.
Mhm.
So bringing in when you think about being in between two worlds, it's allowing for new information to come in. The 29 also adds up to an 11, and of course that's a master number, so it is about that mastery as well as the 2. It brings into the 2, which is about developing relationships in a new way. Um, and I do think what's so fascinating that so many of these kind of unknown planets that are showing up, they're females, so they are actually recalibrating this whole notion of who we're looking at for information,
Mhm.
and that women tend to be very innovative, that they have, it's just studies have shown that women not only are innovative, they understand relationships, or people that are more in their feminine side, they're much better at bringing balance to relationships. They're much better at uh, negotiating and strategizing in terms of what needs to happen. They have the ability to do many things at once. So to understand that you need a strategy and tactics. This is a long game. This is not a short game that we have to be aware of. So for me, it feels there's very comforting, the mothering energy of, like we are being reborn, right? That 13, the renaissance, the rebirth of something new. And it allows us to go deep into the energies of the earth and the intelligence of the earth, as well as connecting to this immense energy coming from, the cosmos. And the other thing that I find fascinating, as you were mentioning about Uranus and um, Chiron, this idea of expanding our idea of healing and disease,
Mhm.
right? Because um, this series is about the land, our crops. Um, I think Pallas Athena is showing us that we need to be prepared to be warriors for the truth, the warriors of what we're bringing into the world, what we're prepared to do, how we can stock our crops, and all of these things that are needed with the series connection. But also, I think the Chiron and Uranus energy is a non-traditional masculine energy. And so this gives us a different aspect of the male energy, but also allows us to understand that um, we should not fear disease, but that we should find the ways to, heal.
Mhm.
Um, I think also we're moving into a time, and I think this is what they're indicating, is we're moving into a time where we're going to bring more alternative medicines into the world, into the forefront.
Mhm.
I mean, certainly with this virus, they've shown us that people doing qigong in hospitals, people doing qigong and yoga and meditation
Simple things like
um,
taking vitamin C and or
right,
getting sunlight
exactly,
some of the day.
right. It's all this kind of bringing in this idea that we don't need to dismiss this, but we need to embrace it, because it's very much connected to the earth, to the cycles, to the truth.
Mhm.
And then if you think about this idea that both Uranus and Chiron are at 6 degrees, I think it also tells us we have to be more connected to how we deal with our health and mental health, as well as emotional health. It's not just a physical, it's all connected. How we think about our bodies, how we embrace our bodies. Like, how do we work with a physical body because of that connection, which is, working the land, being true to ourselves, taking care of our bodies so we can deal with whatever comes up. But also that six energy, the shadow of the six is the martyr.
Mm.
And so it's so easy to slip into the idea that I can't do what I want, other people are making me do it. It's like, no, that is so unhealthy
Mhm.
to choose that path that I'm going to do because I think I'm supposed to. You can help your family, yourself, this planet, our group movement forward by being very aware of not being a martyr, but choosing to take the path of truth of what if I really love myself first, right? That three, then how would I be with people I love? Like when we are loving to ourselves, we can compassionate, we can give that to others. So I
Mm.
think that's a huge part of this. And another one more part about this martyr energy, and I think this speaks to the warrior of the female energy that I think is interesting, or at least that's what I'm hearing. So there is an aspect where we may have to kind of martyr ourselves in order to make change,
Mhm.
right? So it's like we can't refuse to stand up because we may find that we are threatened in some way, because the truth is greater than our individual experience, right? So, and that's the other aspect of this virus, is that some people will die, and that's part of the path to greater awareness, greater willingness to speak up, greater willingness to do things. Like if you know you're going to die tomorrow or next week, like, wouldn't you make different choices about your life?
The stories I'm hearing from those who have had the virus and are recovering now is that they all face death and they all feel completely changed. You know, I
Mm.
really think this whole virus is just changing us completely. It's helping the earth is thriving because of it, because we're not out driving and flying and all those things anymore. The air's cleaner than it's been before. We can see the stars more clearly than we. I saw somebody who photographed Venus from their window in Chicago, and they said they'd never seen it before like that, because the air is just so dramatically cleaner because of this virus and everybody staying home. So I think our whole way of life and our value systems are shifting, as we've said many times. I find it interesting as well that Venus, we are coming up to this Venus retrograde, begins on May the 13th at 21 degrees of Gemini. But in this chart, she's the ruler of the new moon. She's in a trine aspect to Mars in Aquarius. They're both in air signs. They're both in a very loose grand trine, I would say, to Juno over there in Libra, who's all on her own still on the one side of the chart with all the other planets on the other side of the chart. So she's kind of holding the handle of the bucket. So we've got this air grand trine, which is very much about thinking of new ways of doing things, thinking of how we can bring everything into balance with the Venus, the archetypal female, and Mars, the archetypal male. There's such a rebalancing going on. And, you know, it does give me hope. We are moving into the age of Aquarius, which potentially can be a really egalitarian age where, you know, everybody works to their strengths, and we have less hierarchy. And but again, it's also got the potential to be authoritarian. That's where our free will comes in. But I love that Venus, Mars, and Juno, which is about our sacred marriage with each other, with everybody really, and she's there in the other Venus ruled sign, are all coming together in air signs, which is mental thinking, to think of new ways to do everything. And then we also have Mercury, the ruler of Gemini, um, come very speeding up to meet the goddess of chaos, Eris, at that 23 degrees again. It's the number of our DNA, a number of pairs of chromosomes on the 23rd. I truly do believe, and you know, I don't do it from this, oh, you know, we're all reaching this form of ascension, we're all going into this 5D world. I don't know what all that means really, but I do think we're being upgraded as as human beings, or being given the opportunity to upgrade a bit.
Yes,
Sorry.
absolutely. No, no, I don't know what I've never kind of I could never kind of tap into what people talked about. I mean, it's an intriguing idea, but I could never really make sense of it, because what I hear in the records and would keep come back the same thing is this is about us learning to be souls in human bodies. And so there's nothing about ascending away. We're not escaping. We're
We're
landing in our bodies.
upgraded into what we really are, if you like.
Right. So we
Yeah,
can actually make a difference, because as souls, we can do whatever we want. But
yeah.
when we come here in a body, how do we make this work in a way that has us recognizing there's enough for everybody if we're not greedy and grasping? And how do we do this? How do we learn to be more um, uh, egalitarian, more open to the idea that everyone has something worthwhile, and that we're interested in everyone's say, and that we need to take turns being leaders. Uh, to me, you have a much healthier society when you grow leaders, as opposed to keeping everyone like a robot. So I believe education, understanding, and free will around your body and
Mhm.
choices, having the information you need, right? It's really hard to make choices when you don't know what the truth is. I think that's part of this obfuscation, which has really created a problem. Like even with the virus, people don't understand what's happening. But then we've been held in these kind of caves of silence all the time. So now we're breaking free. 23 is that number, breaking free. So having Eris bringing us, rolling in the ball, going, okay, this is it. She's in, is she in a square to Pluto?
In a square to Pluto that's ongoing for the next
Right. So,
18
and
months.
and Pluto, so it's that male female energy again. A lot of that happening, or whatever you want to call it, whatever you want to call male female, the two sides of who we are, the intuitive side and then the physicalizing side.
Yin
One
yang,
side of
night
us
and
is
day, whatever. Yeah.
right, but it's just understanding one side of us is this dreamer, this bringing imagination into intuition into an idea, into who we are. And then the other side is the side that makes things happen in a physical world, materializes it. So we need both. We need to have an idea and we need to be able to materialize it. We need to decide on something and make those connections so we can bring this idea to life, or we can connect with other people and bring it together. This is what we're doing. So just understanding it's as simple as that. It doesn't matter what you call it, night and day,
It doesn't
and
matter now.
yin and yang, male, female. It's that's so unimportant. It's just understanding that the two are important functions. We need both. We need the drive to create on a physical plane, and we need the ability to dream and have an imagination to take this idea, not just leave it hanging out there as we have, right, but bring it into being.
And we're really coming back. We've said coming back into balance before, but I had a thought as you were talking about the original pantheon of the gods. I think and I've long said that the age of Aquarius is bringing the ancient ways into a new way, using them in a modern way. And the ancient pantheon of the gods was not patriarchal. They had 6 men and 6 women, and they all had equal power. It was a council of the gods originally, and I think we have a chance to move back to that kind of council of everybody having kind of the talking stick, if you like. So it's a new way of looking at new leadership as well. We don't have
Right.
one person that has all this power, you know, because we're
Right.
being shown that that's not a good idea, really, aren't we? So,
Right. Well, it's impossible for that to work when one person thinks that that power belongs to them as opposed to the collective.
yeah.
This is the point of having a collective is we all contribute and we're all equal and we all take turns. Not everybody wants to be the one in the charge, but those who do must have the ability uh, to take charge as a council. So everyone, and they're listening to the input of those who are uh, doing the work. You can't create something if you're not listening to the people on the ground. It's from the ground up, right? The roots, that's your root system. It's your strengths.
So it
Is
could actually be a council and then leading down to other councils and all kind of
rings within rings. This is so important.
yeah.
And it's really understanding that no one's taking anything from you. On the other hand, it's a shared experience. So how do we make the best of a shared experience? We don't just listen to 5 people out of millions. We need to have the intelligence of the the wisdom of the land, the intelligence of the people, the ones that are working, and they have a leader or somebody who's their representative. I think we should change some of the words. The
Oh,
representative who brings it, and then that also, cycles around, etc. Because everyone has a different way of bringing knowledge and focusing. Just like you and I, we're talking about the same thing, but we talk about it in different ways, and that makes it more interesting, I think, because it's not just one person's opinion, not just, it's like, oh, there are 2 people. This is more interesting. I can kind of find my opinion better when it's, there's all those opportunities. So that's so powerful. I also want to address this idea that to me is so fascinating is, oh, okay, so the Juno, right?
mm,
I mean, but besides what you talked about, she's also connected to being a protector of women and children. So this raising the bar, recognizing how important it is to take care of the children, to educate them
Hmm.
because they create the future, but also to the value of woman is so important. So I'm sure more of those things will be coming up, as well as she has a monetary connection. And Venus, of course, there's that idea of uh, inflow, outflow. So it may not be money the way we look at it, but certainly exchange or recognition of value. So changing monetary systems, etc., changing how we look at money or how we earn money, that universal salary. Or oh, and I remember this is what came through when you were talking about this idea of the earth getting better, is,
Hmm.
our system has manufactured a lot of stuff we don't actually need, right? Just
Absolutely.
factories pumping out crap that
Yeah.
nobody needs because we've been obsessed with having money so we can buy things. But what if we take away that whole thing, that we don't need what we don't need? What do we need? How can we get it from people we know? uh, how can we be more responsible caretakers of the land, because it doesn't belong to us,
Yeah.
right? We're here as guests. So how can we work with all of those things in a much more mindful way? And then I wanted to address, that's interesting that she has a 9, in Libra.
You
And
know.
of course, now that brings the 6. We have the 3, we have the 6 and the 9. Those are the 3 emotional numbers. And 9 is the one of unconditional love. It's the idea of we are one, connecting to that space. We are one. Uh, very, uh,
I think
you know,
Juno's so important right now because she's on her own and in the whole half
right,
zodiac. She's really kind of is carrying the rest of the chart. So
right.
yeah.
And she's focusing, right? This is how it's getting distributed. This is what's important,
Mhm.
right?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. We're almost
And we almost
at the
at
hour
time.
already, so let's.
Oh, okay. I just wanted one more point that I wanted to make. I mean, we can go on and on, 'cause so many things to talk about. But oh, and Sedna is also at 9, and I think she's also playing a really important role because she has a great connection to the earth and understanding how to be at one with the earth, right?
And
To
what
be at
my chart doesn't show, because this software doesn't have it on it yet, is that another dwarf planet, Haumea, is
right,
actually at 27 degrees of Libra. So we've got 2 of these new dwarf planets at 27 degrees of Venus ruled signs that are all about birth, rebirth, balancing, bringing back into harmony. So yeah,
right,
I didn't mean to
right.
distract, but
No, no, no. I'm glad you said it, because that's these are really important to understand the roles of these different mothering aspects that may not look pretty, but they're definitely teaching us tremendous ways of looking at what we have, like coming back to what we have as opposed to what I wanted. I wanted this, give it to me. Why can't I have it? It was supposed to be this way. And instead, sitting with what is. What do I have that I can create something with, that I believe in? How can I walk this path without trying to kind of reach out too far? Not that we shouldn't have a vision, like you were talking about the Holy Grail vision, but it's more about, and that vision, the Holy Grail to me is all about the spiritual connection. It's like having that relationship, right, with the divine, with the earth, like knowing your place, not in a negative small way, but in a true way. This is who I am, this is who I am, this is who I'm becoming, and this is what I believe in, and these are the steps I need to take. And I think these dwarf
that's why
planets,
the Holy Grail's always been elusive, because we've been
yeah,
looking
we're looking for it outside, but it's
at
inside, right?
it. Yeah.
One, so on that note, the 8, we're in an 8 universal year month right now, and just the nodes being at zeros, double zeros, that's like an 8. It's the breath of life, the beginning. It's the idea of bringing heaven to earth, of being abundant, but knowing we create our own abundance because we have a vision, right?
I do, before we look at the symbols, I do want to mention the node shifting signs, because this will be before the next
Right.
full moon after this new moon. They shift signs, as I said, on May the 5th, to Gemini and Sagittarius. The North Node will be in Gemini, which really is pointing us to, well, they're moving into mutable signs. So we've got a lot of change coming. But the North Node in Gemini is really about absorption of new material, new ideas, new choices, all that kind of thing. And Gemini is going to become so important this year with Venus retrograding in Gemini and the North Node in Gemini, and the eclipses will shift into Gemini and Sagittarius too. So we're really being, the South Node in Sagittarius will kind of bring up familiar issues that need releasing and old beliefs. Sagittarius is very much about our beliefs. We're really being asked to change our preconceptions, let go of any preconceptions we had or preconceived plans. Anything we thought we were planning before all this started is probably going to go out the window, but we're going to be going in new directions, and they're probably going to be more exciting, and curiosity is going to be a huge value coming forward instead of sticking to dogmatic views. So yeah.
Right. More fluidity.
Mhm.
And it's easier to change when you don't. It's just what I was thinking about in terms of rigidity, in terms of religious ideas, as also medical, some of the things we talked about,
Yeah,
my ideas about even war, what that means, having these massive groups of people that don't, it's all, it's all moving kind of biological warfare, chemical, etc. So we don't need all those old things. But
it's
yes, a very different fluidity that's going to just take us more and more, because once we hit in December, when um, Saturn moves,
super to meet. Yeah.
right, we're moving into this whole age of thinking about things differently, letting go of those things that we've held on to with such determination. It's not going to change, it can't change, we're going to go back. I was getting the vision a few days ago about Lot's wife kept coming up, right?
Oh yeah.
This idea, if you remember the story where, they're in this place where everything's falling apart. You can kind of say it's like where we are now, which is probably why I was being given that vision, right? It, in the Bible it says it was evil, but it could have been like this, like there was a disease, everything had fallen apart, the monetary system collapsed, there was like, just wasn't safe anymore, right?
Mm.
And so Lot and his wife get to leave to take whatever information they have to the next space. And that's kind of all of us, right? But the one condition was don't look back. And I take that as like, this time we're in, don't focus on what was and try to
Don't,
make that
don't keep
come
going.
back.
When are we going to get back to normal? That's right.
Right. Right. That the thing is, this is who we are now and where we're going. So if you turn back, you turned into a pill of salt, which is like you will not be able to function. You will not be able to move with the times. You could possibly die, or just be a burden on your family, on your community, because you're so fixated on what was. So it's like, yeah, move forward, move with what you have to create something new, because it's always changing.
Yep.
Things are always changing.
Always. Anyway, let's do the symbols. I'll read
Yes.
first this time. So we're looking at Taurus 4 because we go up a degree when we look at the symbols. And the Chandra symbol is a man talking in his sleep. A psychic faculty is dreamt into and sustained, leaving everything wide open for passive absorption, going so deep in there, an altered state, that you become karmically thrown into the dilemma of translation between the worlds, being used by astral forces and learning to adapt, indwelling a place reserved for those who are not ready to activate. But oh, the dreams, the vapors, remembrance, recapitulation, return, longing for connection between the worlds. You may be able to take the underworld route through if disciplined attunement is fostered. Creative powers are dammed up and filtered through into naive wistfulness. You wait, hope, and are drawn back and back, until the inner worlds have been heard and respected and the balance can be restored. So basically, it's saying go in within and speak to spirit and your dreams,
Right.
listen to your psychic connection in your dreams. Yeah.
Right. Mutate. This is
Yeah.
where we are, right? We have to mutate by allowing
And when it says
the
drawn back, it's not talking about going to the past like we talked about. It's being drawn back into these receptive states. And
right,
yeah,
where the Holy Grail resides.
exactly.
Beautiful. Really beautiful.
And I love
All
Jen's symbol.
right. Right. So the Sabian symbol of the Taurus 4, the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. And the keynote is riches that come from linking the celestial and the earthly nature. In Genesis, the rainbow is the symbol of the covenant of God with Noah. In all mythologies, it expresses in one way or another a linking process, or the bridge used by the divine beings to communicate with mortals. What the linking process brings to the individual consciousness is elusive, as the rainbow never ends where you are, yet it is the source of symbolic, universally valid wealth. All wealth, in a very real sense, comes from commerce, that is, from the commingling of minds and from contracts, and thus is based on faith in the validity of a promise. So, in this phase, we're given a mode of operation which reminds us of the symbol for the second stage, an electrical storm. So man need not be overawed by the celestial display of power, for it leads to a fruitful contact with beings of light. This is a natural kind of communion involving a transubstantiation of matter.
Transubstantiation. Isn't that turning like the
Transubstantiation.
blood, wine into blood or whatever? And
Right. Well, communion really for me, since I'm not religious, but to me, a communion is about it's a co-union, right? So it's just like that idea that we are souls coming into bodies. It's that moment when we kind of we touch the Holy Grail, right? We become one with who we are, or we
that's the
connect,
idea of the actual communion anyway. It's like
right?
the
Blood or
blood of
something.
the Christ turning the wine into blood. That's yeah. But anyway,
Right, right.
yeah.
So it's a very and it's interesting. Both of those are very similar in using different words, but this idea of what is it we seek that the beauty of the rainbow, but we know we can't possess it, right? We just have to kind of open up to it and let it be.
And it could be said to be the Holy Grail. The rainbow is too, because that's always elusive as well. The actual, but
Right.
it's really feeling this connection. And even though I'm not a religious person, I was brought up religious, with Holy Communion, and I was confirmed and all that. And that was very much supposed to be about taking the spirit of the Christ, not what it's generally being presented as by modern day Christians, into you, so that you live that message.
Right.
So,
And what actually makes me think of, because I don't know, I was religion that in my life was Jewish, right?
yeah,
So what we have is that when you're 13, 12, 13, it's the rite of passage, right? You have a bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah or something, a rite of passage. And it makes me think too that this month, because April is typically the month of Passover and
well, we have
Easter,
on the 12th.
right? Right. And of course, Easter originally was a
Pagan.
pagan festival, right? Ostera, which was the goddess of the fertility of bringing to life. So this is
Yeah,
why it was this idea of connecting to the earth, having sex, doing things that bring life into the planet, that feed, and
and
the
all
blood.
death and rebirth. So,
Right. And
yeah,
blood is part of that, feeding blood into the earth.
yeah.
Women would have their periods and let the blood flow into the earth to regenerate. Um, So I think this is all part of it, right? It's so interesting, both of those things and everything we're talking about. It's all about the renewal of this time of who we are and what we're focused on.
So I know for our listeners, I know we're kind of in very challenging times. We've never experienced this before, but the rebirth is coming, and it's I'm not saying project it. You still have to be in the moment and do what you can, but just know that there is rebirth coming, and we can be a part of that rebirth. So
Right. And when you think about the Renaissance, which actually
that
in
followed the
French,
bubonic plague, didn't it? Yeah,
right. Rebirth, Renaissance actually means rebirth.
yeah,
And what came out of it. There is extraordinary things that come out of terrible times. And this is the thing to focus on. What is extraordinary in you that needs to come out? And for some of us, it's all going to look different. For me, I feel like this is my time to take my role as a teacher and guide, step up and stop my excuses. Uh, Someone else may have a completely different. They may feel like they want to make masks, and that's taking them on their route
it
to
might be
leadership.
planting a small garden, anything,
Others may be taking up art, like, or people, these families that are doing these singing and stuff like that. Any of those, it's a creative pursuit that allows your imagination to really uh, drop in. And it's like, this is what I want to do. This feels good to me. And that's the path, really. That's the path to wealth. When we talk about true wealth, is
Oh,
being
absolutely.
fulfilled and expressed, right?
Mhm.
Expressing who you are out in the world and being free to do it. I mean, this is what better time to really be true to that. Expand through the heart, right? The love.
Exactly. Anyway, we should just wrap up and tell people where to find us. We've already, as usual, gone well over the hour.
I know.
That's okay.
I'll
There's so
speak
much to
to
talk
that.
about right now, and we do hope that listening to us gives you some guidance, some comfort, some hope, potential. See that where you can go, what you can do to help this rebirth or renaissance, yeah, or renaissance, however they say it.
Yeah.
Anyway, so Jen, how can people find you?
Right. And just the idea of remembering that it's not a hopeless time, right? That
Oh
there
no,
are things you can do. So this is it. This is your kind of invitation to kind of sit with yourself and be truthful about what's calling you, no matter how small it is, and do that. So where people can find me, so my website, jenduchenne.com. So it's Jen, JenDuchene. And you can hook into my monthly group, my classes, readings that I do there. You can also find me on, you can Google my name, I'm pretty much everywhere. I have a group on Facebook called We Belong Here. I have a page on Facebook. I do mostly weekly videos on my YouTube channel, and I'd love to have more people, uh, whatever it is it follow or subscribe, because, so I can do more. Um, and my cards, the Illuminating Journey cards, are available on my website as well. So,
cool. And similarly, my website is louiseeddington.com, which is LouiseEddington, just one D, my last name. I will get it changed to Cosmic Owl Astrology eventually, but I have a Facebook page, Cosmic Owl Astrology, a YouTube channel, Cosmic Owl Astrology, Instagram, Cosmic Owl Astrology. I am offering a free webinar call on this Thursday at 1 p.m. Mountain. You need to register for the call. You can find that. I've realized I haven't put on my website yet, so go to my Facebook page and find it. Cosmic Owl Astrology. It's hard to remember to put things everywhere sometimes when you do it all yourself, but the call will be talking about this Venus retrograde as Venus enters the shadow, and how it ties into the other planetary cycles of the year, and what that means. So I'm very excited to be doing that. Anybody that registers will get the recording, of course. I also have a Facebook group called Planetary Magic Cafe, and my 2 books are available on Amazon. So everywhere, like Jen. All right. So for now, though, it's goodbye from Lou.
And goodbye from Jen.